This is an 8-iron, and it's a dead shank.
Wow.
Way right.
Oh,
Takes a
dead
hop
shank.
off the path.
You got to be kidding me. Very tough pitch shot right here. You got to hit it into the hill. One hop up and bite, and it's in.
Kind of like that.
Well, I would like to welcome 7-time PGA Tour winner and major champion Mark Brooks to the Sub 70 podcast. Pro, thanks for doing this today. Been looking forward to the conversation.
Well, you too. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, it's so, I mean, like when I was doing the outline for this, there's so much to talk about. Like you've seen so much, in your career. We'll get there, but I'm really kind of fascinated what you're doing with the 803. And for the listeners who might not know what the concept is, what does that business entail? How did you guys start it? What's the philosophy behind it?
Well, playing so many events in my career, that's where the 803 came from. I actually played in 803 regular official PGA Tour events. So that's where the name was derived from. I really didn't want my name on the deal per se, and I've got a team that works with us. But the genesis came from me playing in so many Pro-Ams and the Pro-Am experience. Now, some of the Pro-Am experiences obviously are awesome, and playing with me and getting instruction from me, having dinner with me, being able to ask me any question you want in private is, I think, quite unique. And I just felt like, we could kind of build off that experience. And we're fortunate enough at UT Golf Club here in Austin, which is a fantastic facility and a great partner, to be able to bring that experience to a private facility that's really, really world class, and just let the guys have, anywhere from 1 to, 2.5 days basically of the enhanced, the ultimate Pro-Am experience.
Yeah, hands-on. Yeah, you working with the guys. I'm assuming there's like some team building, stuff like that you can do for a corporate standpoint. I mean, it's probably like kind of customizable, whatever the experience that customer wants to bring some clients down or a group of guys.
That's correct. It could be anywhere from a buddy's trip, girls' trip, to, corporate entertaining, corporate rewarding, or corporate team building. It's, I think what's unique to ours is that it's very customizable. I mean, we can go all the way to, if you wanted to, outfit your group in, new drivers, new wedges, a new putter. We can do all that here as well to enhance the experience. So you can make it, let's just say you can make it, some guys, they want to come in and certainly get some instruction and knowledge and have a great time with the dinners and the fireside chats, but they may want to have a little competition too. So we'll accommodate any request. So it can be as competitive centric as you want, or as casual, or as instruction centric. So, and you were right. You brought it up. I mean, I'm with them pretty much the whole time. I don't go to sleep in the same house, but, or same casita, but, I'm with them the whole time. Our team is, and that's probably the difference. I don't just show up and shake their hand, give them an hour clinic and then walk away. So yeah. I'm with them. I'm immersed with the deal.
Most of the clients, when you sit around and talk to them after their round of golf, or you're sitting by the fire with a cocktail, do they ask, is it more, to the elite level of where you played at for all those years, do they ask more questions on the mental side of stuff, or do you find more questions on golf swing, that sort of thing? Like, is there anything that surprised you from sitting down with all these guys, having these conversations?
Well, when because the environment allows you to do a little more deep diving, I think it definitely starts leaning more towards, besides the, interesting experiences, how many times, what's it like playing with Tiger or Jack Nicklaus, or, even a Phil Mickelson for that matter. Those are the kind of things that come up. And I'd say it definitely starts leaning towards the, how'd you do it? I mean, how'd you fight through all that? Because there's a lot of ups and downs. And, the beauty of golf is we all know that we've played it for most of our lives, know all too well. It is a incredibly humbling experience. So even the cockiest salesman you got is going to get humbled out there. And it's great to bring people all to, I would call it ground zero, so everybody is on equal footing.
Yeah, what a cool experience for the customers or clients, or like I said, to be able to sit down with a major champion and just sort of say, how'd you do it? What was the high points? What was it all like? Like, you've seen it all, which would make it, a very unique, cool experience. What a cool concept for a company. I love it.
Well, thank you.
We're going to get to the playing part of it, but the 803. I mean, I knew you played in a lot of events, but when you add them up between the Champions Tour and the PGA Tour, you're over 1,000 events. That's crazy. I mean, crazy in a good way. I don't think you're not going to see that from the new generation of golfers. No way. No way they get 1,000 events in.
I doubt that. I mean, there's a couple of guys that could, sneak up there on me. Davis Love III's, I think he's under, like he's within like 20 of me. But, I'm not changing the name, and I don't plan on playing anymore. So that's my number, and it's kind of a unique number. And I'll give you the math because, a lot of the kids, I've been out there a lot. I've been fortunate enough to not only has my career spanned all the way from a competitive Jack Nicklaus, Lee Trevino, the Curtis Stranges. I mean, it just goes on and on. Calvin Peete. There's so many names that people forgot about that were fantastic players for periods of time. And I got to play with those guys as well as a lot of this new generation. Not all of them, but, from Ricky Fowler's to, I played quite a bit of tournament golf with Tiger Woods. I won my major championship in the summer that Tiger turned professional. So I got fortunate enough occasionally to get paired with him on Thursdays and Fridays, at following events. So I've gotten to play on tour with, the two, goats of our game. And it's just, I was going to give you the math. I'll give it to you because the kids, I'm out caddying for a friend on tour or working with somebody, they may hear that 803 number and it doesn't really stick. And then, maybe 5 or 10 minutes later, here comes somebody down. Maybe it's the caddy. He says, you played in how many tournaments? And then you do the math. And I said, it's real easy because these guys, 25 is a pretty good number. And it'll only take you 32 years to get to 800 if you play 25 a year. So if you're 25 years old, you can do the math. You'll be 57.
Right.
You'll be 57 when you get there. So it's and then you'll have to play 4 more to pass me. So it's 32 years at 25 a year, and I don't even know how I did it, to be honest with you. It's just, it's what I did. Many of those early years, you're fighting to keep your card, so you're playing every single week the last, 2-3 months of the year. You're just like, you don't feel like you can go home because you never know when you're going to, put a good number on the board and secure your card. So some of those events were out of desperation. Some of them were because I wanted to play.
Well, and I don't think, I don't think as hard as they're swinging these days, their body's not going to hold up it. Even in your late 40s, mid 40s, they're going to be, I don't know how many of those guys are going to be left going at it as hard as they go, which is fine, right? They're going to make plenty of money and they're going to get their wins and they're going to do their thing. But the longevity that you had, I just don't, there'll be some outliers, but I don't think most of the guys are going to be playing nearly that many events. I don't know if their bodies could hold up for it, for as hard as they're going at it.
It's interesting you bring up the injury thing. We were getting injured. I will say this: we didn't swing obviously near the speeds. We had fast and long guys, but the equipment honestly didn't allow guys to swing as hard as they could. The golf ball was had far more spin, and it was less aerodynamically stable. Meaning, if it was hit really hard with 2 or 3 degree open club face, add a bad path to that, man, you could hit it 70, 80, 100 yards offline, and guys did. And so they learned pretty quickly that they had to self-throttle is the word I use. That's the term I like to use. They self-throttled. And, they ended up playing heavier shafts. They played lower lofted drivers. They hit it lower. They couldn't put the ball in the sky. They had to keep it under control. And, guys like Phil Blackmore, who's, 6'7", and, could swing as fast as anybody out there today if he wanted to. But the equipment didn't allow it. And, that was part of the game.
Oh, absolutely, right?
Well, let me go on. And I lost my train of thought for a second there. But I'll tell you this on the injury front. We got injured. Guys got injured. I played with broken ribs, broken toes, herniated discs, partially torn, labrum. You name it. Guys tended to play longer hurt. Now, whether that's good or bad, I'm not going to argue that point, but I'm going to say guys have more knowledge now. They're in better shape, probably. Honestly, let's just face the facts. They're, starting in, in their teens, they're in, let's just say, controlled workout environments,
Right.
getting a little stronger, a little earlier, bigger kids, swinging the club faster. There's no doubt about that. But they don't play hurt as much. So we played hurt. So of those 803, I probably, 20% of them, I probably had some physical ailment going on that in today's world you might not play. So there's no doubt that's changed, and that's pretty true across all sports. So it's like if you're not 100% or 99%, well, let's stay home. We didn't have that attitude back then. I'm talking from the top down. It was, if you could physically walk around and you could swing a golf club, you put the tee in the ground and you hit it and got the best score you could that day, and swallowed your Advil or asked whatever you could take back then. I mean, the horse liniments, we did it all. So
yeah, well, different generation.
Different mind.
Yeah, different.
No doubt.
Ray Floyd was not going to sit on the sideline because something was quote unquote ailing him, right? Those guys rolled hard asses.
I will say this: a lot of us we put ourselves through, our own boot camps, training routines. I'm talking about from hitting balls, and to your hands are bleeding, and that today you'd be in jail if you had your kid, even close to doing something like we put ourselves through. Healthy, maybe not. Make you mentally tougher, darn right.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of us got tough. We played. But it just goes on and on. The subjects are endless. Course conditions. I mean, things were not pristine in the, I grew up in the 70s and, 80s through early 80s in college. And, I mean, the courses these kids now play in college, for example, at a pretty decent D1 program are incredible. I mean, we were honestly playing a lot of, and no offense to anyone, because I grew up on it and love it, but we were playing pretty hardcore muni golf and, bad lies. Obviously, the time of year you're playing in some pretty rough weather with golf that people don't realize. You're playing in the early fall and then you're playing in early spring, and golf courses aren't ready yet. But we played some junk, and I think in the long run it made us way better, to be honest with you, and tougher. Yeah,
it's kind of like how the guys would kind of back in the day, or you'd still see a little bit now, going over to the European tour and kind of learning how to travel. And golf courses are different; they're not all the same, and probably not as good as the PGA Tour condition-wise, week in, week out, right? And kind of just learn how to get the ball in the hole. Tough conditions,
right.
Traveling harder, just a tougher lifestyle. And I loved it when the guys would kind of, your generation, a lot of that, when guys would kind of go play all over the world if they weren't on the PGA Tour to, for lack of a better word, kind of go out there and figure it out, right? How good can you be?
That's true. No doubt. Guys would go to, they go play in Asia and putt on what was back then was called, a lot of greens over there were called Core-Eye, and it was like putting on a bristle pad that didn't have smooth bristles. Weather, Europe deals with rougher weather, no doubt about that. What it does, you go, well, what does all that do? What did it do? And I would say it teaches the kids, whatever, mental toughness, yes, separate the meek and weak from the strong, but it also made the kids learn how to be more prepared, including, that includes your equipment. I mean, how many kids, even tour guys almost show up like with no umbrella or something,
Yeah.
barely a towel, and it's a 60% chance of rain. Fortunately, on the tour, you got caddies and you have, entourages that can get you whatever you need. But my point is, it's amazing to me how many times I'll show up at even these elite junior events, and these kids just aren't prepared. I don't mean their golf game; their bags aren't prepared for the weather conditions that could change. So it's pretty interesting, and that's what you had to learn, and we learned it the hard way. I mean, you'd show up out there and we had to be coming sideways. You're in a short sleeve shirt, the northern blue in. The next thing you know, it's 45 degrees and raining sideways, and you don't have a sweater or an umbrella. You're in trouble, pal.
Yeah.
You're in trouble. You're in deep doo-doo.
Yeah.
So,
it was a different generation for sure, right? I'm going to get in, you're making my job here easy, because we're definitely going to get into some of the characters back in the day from, I think your career is so interesting. So actually I was going to bring that up, and we'll talk about it in a second. You played with Nicklaus when he was still really good, and Tiger, and all these guys in between. So we'll get there. But I have one last question about still playing. Do you miss playing the Champions Tour and the competition and preparing? I know you're not out there any longer, one or two events every now and then. Are you still exempt if you want to play?
Well, I would be. I guess the term would be conditionally exempt. Would be fair. I could be in Morocco this week, but I honestly have had some eye trouble, and that I'm going to get fixed here hopefully soon. But I could play. I don't know how many. It varies. Probably 8 to 10 a year. I don't plan on that. I mean, maybe a few, just to remind myself why I don't go out there. I'm 61. I'll be 62 in March, and I hit the ball fine for. I'll probably swing better today than I did, just messing around here. But I can't play because right now I'm looking out of one eye, so it's a little bit awkward on the golf course. But I do not really miss the traveling, and to be perfectly honest, which I like to be as honest as possible, and I don't sugarcoat it. I didn't play great on the Champions Tour, and I didn't have the same experience that a lot of guys have, where you come out and immediately, kill it. I had a few real good chances to win early my first few years, and it was like a continuation of the grind that the last, let's just say 5 years or 7 years on the regular tour, when you're, let's just say beyond your best. So probably didn't have the right mindset going out there, and I did not play great on the Champions Tour. I had some good tournaments, of course. Enjoyed being around some of the guys that I'd played many, many years with, but it's a different experience, and no knock to the Champions Tour. And again, I'm going to be honest, there's a lot of events that are fantastic events on that tour, but it's not the show. And when you've been in the show for 27 years, it'd be like a guy playing, honestly, like playing in the, I hate to use the other sports, but you've been playing in, a big arena, and the next thing you know, you're 2 or 3 levels down, and you're like, wait a minute, there's different energy here. There's, the level of competition is great, but as far as the atmosphere, it was different. I'll be fair. And, we played 2 Pro-Ams a week. Sometimes you'd play a Monday, so you're playing a Monday, Wednesday, Thursday Pro-Am, and, it's not that you're worn out, but it's just like it becomes a grind at times. And one other reason I'm not missing it is I'm staying very busy, teaching and doing the 803. I enjoy, doing a little bit of television commentary work. So I'm staying busy. I feel like I'm almost busier now than I was when I played, because all you had to worry about then was really your Pro-Am time or your tee time on Friday, Saturday, or Sunday. And now it's, Monday to Sunday deal. So I'm staying busy. I'm not missing it. And, I won't say it's time to step aside and let somebody else go, because that's not what the Champions Tour was intended to be. It's turned highly competitive, which I don't think was the goal. But anyway, I hope I answered that one.
Well, yeah, and I mean, like you said, and if you're not fully mentally, into it or whatever it might be, right? People don't. I've always said, like, you go shoot 15, 16 under par in 3 days on some of those tracks. Like, the level of competition is still really, really good. And I can only imagine, like, if you don't have that edge like you really wanted on the regular tour out there, it makes it hard to compete. You know what I mean? Like, harder to compete because the level of competition is so good still. Like, those guys can really, really play out there, 100%.
No, they really can. And there's a lot of guys that are killing it out there that, honestly don't have they don't have it's quite as much scar tissue as some of us do. So, and I'm not talking about not physical scar tissue, but that as well as mental scar tissue. So
yeah, it's a tough grind, right? To stay at your very best, the work behind the scenes that takes to be ready to win. It's a lot, right? And I can see where over time, that flame isn't burning quite as hard because you've kind of accomplished it all. I can see where 1,000 starts is good. There's other things in life versus the work and time that takes. I was going to ask you, and like I said, you brought it up. Like, you've played with Nicklaus, you've played with Tiger, and you also played in your prime where there was, golf swings all didn't look the same. Some characters, right? Like, Weiskopf. The personality. I loved Tom Weiskopf, but, he wasn't cookie cutter. Ray Floyd with that, hard-ass stare. Watson, Trevino, like you mentioned, Curtis Strange. Like, is anybody tougher than Curtis Strange on the back nine on a Sunday? Like, you played with a really interesting era of between Jack and Tiger, and then all of those guys in between who are just legends as well. Like, what an experience, to play for that long and see it all. And what's sort of your thoughts on the new players versus those guys I kind of brought up, who you could recognize the golf swing from 5 fairways over, and the walk and the stare and all of it.
Well, there's so many. I mean, you could talk for 5 hours about it. You couldn't exhaust the subject. One, you hear repeatedly, and these guys are great athletes now, but so were the old group, the majority. There was always the outlier, the guy that didn't look like the athlete by the time he, was maybe 30, playing the tour, a little overweight. But, if you went back and researched the guy's history, the guy played, might have gone all the way up to, minor league pro baseball, or he played college, played other things all the way through high school. I think there was definitely a tendency for guys to come from other sports into golf, and it wasn't just the money, but obviously the popularity mattered. So guys didn't play year-round golf until really they got to college. I'm going to say, probably guys all the way back, I'm going to say into the 80s. I mean, maybe late 80s, early 90s. It was not as, I won't say, well, it wasn't as popular a sport in a lot of ways. It was a fantastic sport, but guys played other sports. I mean, they played football or basketball. They usually narrowed it down to a couple, but they only played golf maybe 4 or 5 months a year. And there's still some guys. Gary Woodland's an example where there's a handful of them. Even Dustin Johnson played basketball deep. And I think that was, honestly good for the guys as far as, not getting so sports specific, and golf is so mental that, if you got somebody at, age 10, 11, 12 that is purely golf, man, you got a long road, till you're 30, trying to deal with this game and all the ups and downs that come with it. But I just think guys were, I'm going to say, go on a limb and say a little more well-rounded, sports-wise, maybe kept the game in perspective longer. They're recruiting these kids at 13, 14 now for college, and it's insane. And so, a lot of them, and I'm around a lot of elite junior players or better junior players. I mean, it's like they have entourages now. I'm talking pretty early, 14, 15. They've got 5 coaches, 5, they got them all. And I just believe, deep in my soul, that a lot of this stuff, if you don't learn it yourself, it doesn't stick. It doesn't stick as long. So I think that's a huge difference. And now I'll step forward, and you jump in any time. But you'd say, well, why do they all hit it so decent? Well, there's several prongs. I'll highlight number one: video. Okay, I said it 3 times. People being able to see their swing and actually see it slow motion accurately has really changed, very, very quickly how these kids swing a golf club. My personal experience, I don't feel like I became let's say a tour caliber player, honestly, until late 1987, right around 87, 88, when I finally just said, I've had enough. I've tried it on my own and occasional lesson here and there, and went home and, got with my local great player, guy that turned teacher. And, we bought it. I don't know if he bought it or I bought it, but we got an 8mm camera, and I started doing the filming. And he had a plan of how he thought I should change my golf swing, and I bought in. And being able to see my swing, I've got, I'd have to dig them up, but I made dramatic swing changes in probably, I'm going to say 3 months.
Was it dramatic. One of those things, too, where you thought it was one way was it just eye-opening to see it on film, where you're like, oh, shit, that is not where that club is at. But it feels there, but it ain't there.
That's correct. So trying to figure out how to turn feels into something that's real is still today it's not as big a hurdle, because you get to show them. You got the guy says, well, I thought it, I teach all kinds of players, and, you've got the guys that, they point the club, 20 yards right of the target at the top. We call it crossing the, line. And you'll show him up at, where you want him to go. I'll say, well, why don't you just point that thing at the wall behind you at the top? You know what I mean? Just point it straight back, and he'll make a swing, and he'll think he pointed it there, and he might have moved from his original position, maybe an inch or two, and he feels like he moved it 5 feet.
Right.
So then you show them, and they look at it, and they can't argue with you because it's now even better than empirical data. It's real. And when you see it, and I love having the mirrors there, and, they can, mock their backswing looking at the mirror and go, wow, that is way different than it feels like. And so that's part of it. Show them what to do. Then they get to feel what they do while they're seeing what they're doing, and they have a better shot at more quickly turning a feel into something real. And you couple that with the ball flight, data that's out there. I'm going to call it's just now there's so many things that I'm going to say. I'll steal lots of terms. In the old days, there was a lot of myth and a lot of swing theories and things like that. Today, with the launch monitor technology and the ability to track the golf ball, the club face, the shaft, everything that's going on, there are a lot of things that are now what I call non-negotiables, okay? And they're non-negotiable. So when you're with a student and they think they're doing something and they think, well, that's why it's doing that, you can tell them, you can think all you want, but here are the facts, the physics facts. They're non-negotiable. So you can arrive there different ways, but when you arrive at impact, the moment of truth, it's not going to lie. Okay. And so you start doing that, and then you start getting to show video where they really are, how they're moving their weight. I mean, it's a joke how much information's out there. And if it's used properly, you can get somebody swinging the golf club pretty darn good, pretty darn fast, if they're open-minded and fairly athletically inclined. And I think it's a long-winded way of going about. I think it's why you see so many swings so similar now. They're doing it right. Let's just put it that way. The good teachers out there, I hope someday to be considered one, are all teaching very similar things. If they're not, they're probably off base. So there's different ways to get guys to do certain things, okay? You know what I'm saying? There's different methods to the madness. But the madness is going to end up in the same place, including setup, posture, structure, how you move your weight, how you become dynamic, and then how you deliver the golf club to the golf ball. Those are non-negotiable. And
it's crazy to think too. Like you had your card and you had to kind of go relearn. Like now that's done at like you're saying 12, 13, 14, 15 years old. You were an exempt tour player, grinding and had to go do that at that point. And now it's done so much earlier, right? Where you start to see those things.
Right. I'd hit a wall, but what I brought out of those first, let's say that was 4 or 5 years on tour, so 4 years of college. I've been playing pretty high-level golf for, a dozen years. I mean, go back to a little bit of amateur golf there. And you're like, was it start over? No. What did those first 12 years teach you to do? Well, one thing I learned early on, and I was around great players. I'll just go out on a limb and tell you fact. I was around a lot of gamblers, and I was around tour players, wannabe tour players. And one of the things that came from the early method of, I'd say the common method of teaching was I learned face awareness really early on. And, I grew up in Fort Worth, so, it was the Byron Nelson, Ben Hogan, zone. And, Byron's swing was noteworthy because of his little dip on his downswing, and then how far it looked like he carried that club head down the line.
Right.
Okay, so we kind of grew up with that philosophy, and the biggest change has pretty much been, as far as, let's just say, technology-wise. I grew up thinking that the path the club head was on was what started the ball flight. Let's just start there. And so, swinging down the line with a square club face at impact, that was like the ultimate. That was sort of what you thought. I'm going to get this face to go down the line with strike it square as long as humanly possible, and that'll be my best shot of hitting it straight or controlling it. And even though that was, technically wrong, I mean, the truth is the ball starts where the face is pointed at impact, and the pass what causes the curve. It's a little bit opposite. However, because we were so face-oriented and, we thought the path started the direction, if you were playing good, you were probably what I call in a pretty neutral position, unless you just played one big old sweeper shot.
Right.
And you got to remember, our golf ball, emphasize it a lot. There's no question. The golf ball I grew up playing all the way till probably the early 2000s curved in the air quite a bit more than today's golf ball does. The Bellotta golf ball.
Well, yeah, question. And to get the spin down, you guys had to play draws, right? Like pretty good amount of draw to get it. If you need to be sneaky long, you had to hit that power draw out there a little bit, right? It's the only way to get the spin down on it.
No doubt. With a driver, at better speeds, better player speeds, it was pretty hard to hit a cut, fade. Let's call it a fade, where the pass across, space is a little open. It was pretty hard to hit a, let's call it flat line cut. A cut driver that didn't spin too much. No question about that. I kid around. I tell guys all the time because they'll ask me, well, how did you, learn to hit a hook, or when did you? I grew, when I started, my grandfather hit a 30 or 40-yard slice, so that's what I watched, growing up. Jerked it inside, lifted over the top, hit a toe slice. He was probably about a 90 shooter, so that kind of was my model when I first started. So I was a slicer early on, and whatever pro grabbed me, it was probably Doug Higgins at Diamond Oaks. Grabbed me and just said, you're going to have to learn how to hit this golf ball from the inside, and, hit the inside of the golf ball. And until you duck hook everything, I don't want to see you again. So I learned how to play from the inside, early on. It actually, I played too much from the inside now, and did for years. But it was interesting. And I heard the other day, so I'll go to I'm old now. You have to bear with me. So I told guys, listen, this is my semi-joke. I said, well, how did you learn to hook, or why did you hook it? I said, well, let me explain to you. Where I grew up in Texas, Bellotta balls, wood, steel shafts. If we had 8 guys there on the first tee, and we picked captains, and you were going to choose side, everybody got to pick a player for your team, your 4-man teams. I said, I'll promise you, if it was windy that day, the faders, slicers got picked last every time. So
right,
said,
couldn't control the ball, right? Right.
Yeah, you learned how to hit a little snipey hook pretty early on, so you wouldn't get picked last. And that, I'm actually kind of half not kidding on that. And I heard the other day, and it's a saying, and Paul Azinger always comes up with lots of zingers from the zinger, but he said the other day, I heard somebody say, or I heard it. He said, one of the things about golf when you're learning to play golf is, you have to learn how to hook it first. You got to really learn how to hook it to be a good player. The first thing you should learn is how to hook it. He said, then when you do, you'll spend the rest of your life trying to figure out how to not hook it. And it's pretty interesting because there's a lot of truth in that statement for a lot of people.
Oh, I agree, right? And I'm 49 years old, so I still started off, being taught hitting low hooks. And, as the equipment changed 10, 15 years ago, right, it's like, I can kind of hit a little straight fall off and the spin comes down. So right then you kind of are unlearning everything you were taught as a kid of kind of not hitting as much from the inside, and how, if I'm playing well, like I want to go dead straight and just kind of fall off to the right now, which is so much different than, when I first started off playing and what the ideal ball flight was. I'm still in that generation that started off with that old equipment, and then mid 2000s sort of you could see, hey, this is spinning lower. As the shafts got better and the heads got better and the ball got lower spin off a driver, of hitting that little peeler is not a bad way to play golf. So, but I still agree, you kind of got to learn how to hit a little draw first, and then you kind of can still work it back. But isn't it funny now how everything is like, I'm as anti-left as I can be. Like, I hate the ball going left, right? And I promise you, for the first 5 years, I tried to hook everything.
Well, it's changed so much. I run probably like 103, 104 miles an hour club head speed. I like top out in the 105 range. And I honestly, with these drivers today, the best drive for me to hit is actually a slight fade. And that's because it actually has enough spin. I actually have to try to spin it a little bit to keep it in the air, because my, 10 or 15 yard hook with a driver usually dives below 2,000 RPMs and doesn't carry very well. So it's
Right.
it's really interesting, very interesting.
It is. Yeah, I mean, like I said, it's changed a lot. Like I said, you can almost see it generationally, right? Like our home course here in DeKalb, Illinois, Northern Illinois University's team plays there, and it's D1. And you just watch the body rotation and the speed of these college kids, hitting 8-irons from 170. And, they're not, a lot of them, they're not hitting hooks. It's this big, high, towering fade that kind of falls off. And it's like, wow, I mean, I'm not an old man yet, but there is such a generational divide between what equipment allowed you to do. It's fun to watch the kids hit it that hard, but it's definitely, they're taught a different way of how to do it. They're better athletes and, like you said, all the rest of it, but the equipment makes a huge difference as well. No doubt about it.
No, I agree. Their technique's better earlier, and they don't get real, typically they don't get in just these awful, positions and bad habits early on. If they got anybody with, any knowledge at all with eyes on them, they typically will stop them from doing something silly, including, like the grip. Is the grip overdone? Not really. I mean, it's still your only connection to the golf club. So, if somebody's pretty wild with the grip, usually you'll at least question it and, have them at least experiment with some other things, to try to just, help them get in a better position. But no, it is amazing. The high speed guys, the part that they're still not very good at as a group, putting is still putting, number one. And then, that the high speed guys a lot of them have a lot of trouble, from 120 yards and in. It's still an issue.
Yes. Right.
They could be better. They could be better. So
I know we were texting yesterday, and you did, and I thought this was probably true. When you were on the Hogan staff, you got to spend a little bit of time with Mr. Hogan, with some meetings in his office. What was that like? Did he ever give you swing advice, or what was sort of those meetings, with somebody of that stature, and what was he like in person? How did you grab any life experience or tidbits from Mr. Hogan from spending a little bit of time with him?
Yeah. I mean, certain things like, one of the first meetings that I remember, they'd be short, it was usually because I was in there with equipment or on the staff. I was on the staff for probably half my career. When I first shook hands with him, and I don't remember, it may not have been the first time, but I'd been playing, and we shook hands, and he grabbed my right hand and flipped it over, and then he looked at both hands, and all he was feeling for calluses.
Right.
He wanted to make sure. First of all, he wanted to make sure I had some calluses on my hands, which I fortunately did, and they were in decent places. So that always stood out to me. It was sort of like it was the nod of approval that this kid is actually working at it, and I'm okay with that. So I'm okay with him on my staff, and I dug into the equipment, part of it, more than rudimentarily early on. So we would talk a little bit about equipment, and he was always, experimenting. I mean, he was the consummate tinkerer, and I don't know if he did. Obviously, he didn't do as much when he was playing competitively when he got it right, but I probably got those two things from him the most. That it was just. But as far as a person, I mean, he was a perfect gentleman to me at all times, and very quiet, very reserved, and serious is the word I would use. He was serious about golf, life, his company, and just the consummate professional.
Well, you would expect nothing less from Mr. Hogan, right? I mean, that's exactly,
No.
I've obviously never met him, but that's exactly how I picture him being, right? Serious, wants you to work hard, has a level of expectation in this young man on my staff, right? I'm sure you did not want to disappoint Mr. Hogan.
Well, he wore a suit and tie, perfectly tailored suit to work. And I'll just give you an example. His coat was not thrown over a chair over on the side, tossed on a sofa. It was hung and hanging. Okay.
Yes.
I mean, it's just like the example. I mean, it's like when he came to the office, even if he was a minute late, which would have been a rare feat, he would hang his jacket. Jacket was hung And, I mean, it's just one more example. You know, you're like, well, that's detail, preparation. I mean, nobody was more prepared. Nobody today is more prepared than he was. Did he do most of it on his own? I think he did. So, you know, he was a self-taught, you know, PhD psychologist. You know, he did it. I mean, that's why he was who he was. And his legacy endures. I mean, he's legendary.
1,000%, right? I mean, it's still, it's my favorite golf swing. I mean, I'm not athletic enough to make that move. But if you kind of look at the body rotation, it's sort of a modern swing with old equipment, right? Of not a whole lot of hands, played a little fade, but he could play the hard fade, you know, with that equipment. Like, if you sort of look at it now, boy, it's that swing, you just look at it now and go, that would work on tour today still.
No doubt. I think the only thing he would have changed was he would have, you know, obviously with the golf ball changes and equipment changes, he would have changed his launch conditions and hit the ball higher. I think that's really the only thing he would have done. He just would have hit it higher. He already moved it the right direction, you know, for his primary shot. But, you know, anybody thinks Hogan couldn't draw it or never hit a draw, they're out of their mind. They've never seen him hit a ball. So he could move it both directions at will. High, low, you know, whatever. His preferred shot matched the equipment of the day. And I think he would have, you know, made the minor adjustments to raise his launch condition. And he was fast. I mean, he had plenty of speed and power. And, you know.
Oh, 100%.
Anyway,
right. If you look at that.
One of the great.
Yeah, he's still, like, he moved it, right? You can just watch those old films. I bet you with that old equipment, he was 112, 114, 115. You know, he had some movement in that body rotation and lag, right?
Ben Hogan would have been a 120-plus person, no doubt.
In today's climate, yes, right? I mean, he's probably that old equipment short driver moving at 115. You know that.
So now you go deep dive because you're podcasting. So you go, well, why was he such a great player? Where did all that stuff come from? And I still say it goes back. You got to go back and look at his background, which it's been well documented as the best it can be. You know, we can't dig in there. And as the older he got, the more interviews he granted. But there was at least a glimpse into the past, his you know, childhood and upbringing, and, you know, the caddy yard, and having the privilege to be able to play golf.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, the privilege to be able to play golf. It wasn't just something to do. It was a privilege for him to be able to, you know, play golf. And he didn't take that lightly, and he took it very seriously. And I think, you know, a lot of us, you know, grew up, and I'm not tooting my own horn, but I mean, I was fortunate to play, you know, grow up playing some private golf, but I did play a lot of public golf. And there's just this mindset, you know, that gets in, you know, we're all into this, you know, and rightfully so, inclusiveness and all that. But I mean, it was really a privilege to go get to play Colonial or Shady Oaks or somewhere, and you didn't take it lightly. It wasn't just, oh, well, you know, we deserve to be over there. Why don't, you know, we should be able to play over there. The mindset's completely different. I mean, and then you compare it to the other sports, and you go, there is no comparison. I mean, basketball, it's a gym with two backboards and, you know, maybe a net, maybe not a net, but it's still basketball. And we kind of had that attitude with golf. You know, it's not a very good course. It's kind of ratty, but are there 18 holes out there with, you know, cups cut and tee markers out there, and you just went and shot the best score you could? And, you know, until I got later in life, it got more spoiled to pristine conditions. You know, I grew up pretty rough. I mean, I grew up playing a lot of rough stuff. I mean, we played our high school regional. I was in the highest class, would be 6A now, in Texas. Our regional event was at a place called, and, you know, bless its soul, it's gone. It was called The Trap in Denton, Texas. It had 18 push-up greens. The wind blew 50 miles an hour. We were playing in March. And, you know, they wouldn't even be offended. There were times it was a dog trap. It was just a dog track. And that's how you got the state high school championships. You had to go through the dog track. And so, I mean, the hardest hole in the golf course was, I don't know, about 12 or 13. It was about 215 yards. You got to remember, Balata ball days, wind blowing 30. It was a driver. And you go, well, why was the hole so hard? I go, because it was this little tiny, probably 18 yards deep by 12 yards wide, push-up green with a cattle pond in front of it. I mean, it was brutal. So those experiences make you appreciate, when you get to play really well-groomed, nice golf courses, it's just a different perspective. I don't know how else to put it. But
yeah, and there's no
I
question.
got spoiled like everybody else. Now, I'll admit to that.
But once again, I don't, never met Mr. Hogan, but you would have to imagine that upbringing and his I mean, that also gave, for lack of a better word, pushed him, made him who he was, of excellence in everything that he did, from a golf, from his own game to that, the designs he did at Hogan, right? Like that childhood, and for lack of a better word, growing up tough, like really tough. There's no question that I would have to imagine was that inside burning fire, right? That it was. I'm getting myself out of this situation, and it's going to be nothing but excellence.
Yeah, and I think he became comfortable. Obviously, I don't, deep. I don't know, but I will say this: I think it's pretty fair to say that Ben Hogan was very comfortable in solidarity.
Yeah. So, yeah.
I emphasize this all the time with my kids, and it's tough. I mean, if you have to learn how to practice, for example, and play sometimes as much as you can by yourself in solidarity, and learn how to set your own goals, GOALS. And that includes for everything from how you're going to think, how you're going to, the shots you play, the swings you make, the approach you take. Because when you go out there and play, I mean, it's like nowadays there's so much, and I love a lot of it. I mean, don't get me wrong, but on the caddy thing, but it's like there's so much emphasis on the caddy and the team and all that. But the bottom line is the guys that really kick ass for a long time, the majority of them are very independent, deep down self-confident guys and gals that are comfortable, not only in their own skin, but also being alone, because it's pretty lonely out there. I mean, the caddy's there, but, he's not going to hit the shot. He doesn't have to, ultimately make the decisions. So it's very interesting to me, but I think Ben Hogan proved, he practiced alone. He loved it. And I think it was one of his secrets. I mean, that to me is the secret. He figured out the secret by himself alone, not with a camera, not with somebody there. He is the consummate turning feel into real player of our era. No doubt in my mind. He had guys, I know he had guys, it's documented that he'd bring over one of his best friends or something and say, hey, where am I aiming? Or, am I kind of set up over there? Because you couldn't, you can't see yourself. He did that sometimes. He had confidants that would help him out with little bitty things. But as far as the secret, he found the secret in the dirt on his own. No question in my mind. Zero.
I agree with you. And that's why I say look at that swing today, and it's still just as pure as it gets.
And guess what happens when he hits a bad shot? Whose fault is it?
That would be on Mr. Hogan. Nobody else.
That's correct. That is correct. He took responsibility for his good shots and his bad shots, and his level, his what would the word be? His, let's just say his good shot was, he hit so many good shots in practice that his level of acceptability, what was not a mediocre shot, was quite different than the average guy.
Yes.
He wasn't just, going out there warming up, go to the first tee with a group, have a $5 bet, $2 bet, whatever it was, play around, and then head to the bar. I mean, that wasn't his style. So, and that's not the style of most great players either. So but he raised the bar. He raised the bar for people around him. I mean, a lot of great players came out of his era, no doubt. He influenced so many people, it's not even funny.
1,000%. Yeah.
And just from the work ethic and all that, and it carried on. It carried on.
Yeah, imagine what you'd have to do. You watch that guy in the range and go, what do I got to do to beat him? Right? I mean, that's motivating in its own right.
How about Lee Trevino? Lee Trevino's he's a good friend and phenomenal subject, just almost as interesting, if not more so, than Ben Hogan. So there's another guy.
Yeah.
I promise you, these guys they just loved the game. They loved striking the ball, and they loved figuring it out on their own. And there's a lot to that.
And they both owned their golf swings as much as you can.
Well, you're darn right.
Yeah. Well, got to ask you about this one. 96, you win the major. You're forever a part of history, Mark. And how often, memories of that weekend, how often do you look at your Wanamaker and just reflect on that accomplishment, right? I mean, you're part of the history books and forever. And it's a hell of an accomplishment. It's so hard to win out there, and to have one, it's got to be pretty damn satisfying, I'd have to imagine.
Well, I don't very often. So, as you get older, it's about all people ask you about, because it's, like you said, it's it's a lasting win. Probably most of my wins, won't even go through them, but, some of the tournaments don't even exist anymore. Or, you won a tournament, and 3 years later they've changed courses and changed sponsors and moved across town, and it's quite different. The majors are enduring. In my lifetime, probably yours. You're only 49. You can live another 50 years, and the majors are still going to be the four most important events.
Correct.
With the Ryder Cup, probably hanging in there behind those four. But objectively, looked at my career, I'd say I spent 4 or 5 years learning how to, manage myself, and, figured out I need help, or I'm not going to be doing this very long. And that's when I changed my golf swing and got actual help. And so that was a huge change. And I started working on it in 87, and I've been on tour pretty much since summer of 83. And I won that next summer in 88. And I probably had a, 12-year run, something like that, pretty typical. If you really go study it and look at it, most guys that are even really good players, they usually have about a 8 to 12-year run where they play pretty darn good golf for that stretch. And mine was I'm pretty much the same boat. I scrape, you'll scrape a good finish out here and there, but on the front and back end of that. But that was pretty much the run. So that year I had already won at the Hope in, I guess that would have been January. And then I won in Houston in the spring, and I had already played a decent major, before. And so I was already playing pretty good. I mean, I was confident in my game, and I wasn't surprised that I was in contention. And as far as majors, my let's say, where did you get over the line and play? I didn't have a great majors record. I played a ton of them, but it's kind of like if I started out pretty good, I actually hung in there. Usually, I had several good major finishes, but if I got in there, I hung in there. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yep. You weren't afraid of the moment.
Either missed the cut or did pretty well.
Right.
But in the 92 U.S. Open at Pebble Beach, I was in like the second to last group on Sunday, and I love Pebble Beach. It was like a lot of people, it's one of my favorite places on the earth. And I got the second to last group that day, and I was playing with Tom Kite, who ended up winning the tournament. And I think I parred 1 and birdied 2, so I was right at the lead after, whatever that would have been, 56 holes. And that's the day, the wind did blow excessively. I will say.
That day was
pretty nasty.
Brutal, right? I mean,
and I shot 85 or something, and just completely lost it, never changed game plan. And that massive collapse, at least to me, was kind of a turning point. It probably took a little time to get over, because I just, reflect and, how did this happen? And, a couple people flew out to watch, and I'm like, good Lord, it was just a disaster. By the time I got to about 8, I was already done. You're leading the tournament or tied for the lead through second hole, and 5 holes later, you're toast. But I learned a lot. And, failing miserably on a pretty big stage was a pretty big turning point. And that was in 92. Yeah, it was 92 Open. And so, honestly, I wasn't afraid, because I survived that crash. Does that make sense? I survived it. Was it painful? Was it, humiliating? All the above, adjectives? Yes. Did I learn a lot from it? Darn right. darn right I learned a lot from it. So, I credit my, collapse in 92 at Pebble Beach, my favorite place, to play tournament golf in America, to my 96 PGA. Definitely played a huge role, no doubt.
So when you were on that back nine in 96, after having, like I said, few wins earlier in the you were, I don't know if you ever fully comfortable, but more comfortable. That learning experience kind of got you to be able to win a major. In other words, a lot of that went in the memory bank, and the more you probably get used to it, the more you're like, okay, I'm not shocked I'm here. I'm supposed to be here, so I put the work in. This is what I do for a living. I'm ready for this moment.
No doubt. No doubt about it. I mean, and you reflect back, because I'm trying to pass along, knowledge and, experience more than anything. It's both. And I've played a lot of golf. I'm a golf nerd, from equipment to, golf course design, teaching, teaching methods, all of it. It's almost all consuming, and it's why I still do what I do, talking about golf. But, one of the things my teacher, Doug Higgins, one of the things you go, what stuck? Well, what about a swing? I don't have one specific swing thought. I have many that, I've written down and have that came out of our years of working together. But one thing was we talked about, which he did, and he wasn't a psychologist. He was just a player that, got close to making it and kind of ended up not playing the tour. Was like, look, about being nervous or, unsure of yourself, he's like, all you have to do, and this was from his experience, is that you only have to be calm enough to concentrate on, executing your golf swing. Does that make sense? I'm simplifying it.
Yep.
So this is what he was speaking of now I know, obviously, it's learning how to not be results oriented. And it is huge. I mean, it's like, to me, I've dealt with tons of kids already, and tour players, and good amateurs. It is honestly the number one. If I had to single one thing out, I'd say, if you can learn, and it takes work, to not be focused on the result or outcome, you're going to end up doing better. No question about it. And when people say, well, no, he doesn't have swing thoughts, I'm like, crap, he doesn't. I mean, visualization. Well, I just visualize that swing. That's a swing thought.
Right.
That's a swing thought. It doesn't have to be some finite written down, two words, but if you're visualizing and, there's a ton of guys you could go on and on about. You go, well, does he have a specific swing thought? No, but, use Jason Day or Sam Snead. They stood back there, and Sam Snead used to say, how do you hit a cut? He goes, well, I just sort of think cut. Well, I go, it's more than that, okay? The way he set up to the golf ball, the path of his club head that he wanted to produce that fade, he visualized it, and he probably rehearsed it. If you had enough film to go back and go, he's rehearsing that fade, man. And now he walks into the ball, a different way than he does if he's playing a draw. All those things matter. And so if this is true in life, because I'm guilty of it like everybody else. We spend so much time worrying about stuff that hasn't happened yet. Now, you got to be prepared. I get all that, but in general, we spend a lot of time worrying about stuff that hasn't happened yet. And that's the same. It's true with a golf shot. Same is true. So if you knew what you needed to do to hit a decent golf shot to have a reasonable outcome, why wouldn't you just concentrate on doing that thing that makes you have a reasonable outcome? It's not complicated, but it's deep. It really is. So I'm guilty of it.
Yeah. So that experience from '92, when when it starts going off the rails, is it what people think, like all of a sudden everything starts going fast and the mind starts racing? Oh shit, I'm 6 behind and Tom Kite's even par, and my God, what happened? Versus when you got to 96, were you in that proverbial zone where stuff just sort of slows down and you visualize the shot? Like, was it just a complete, am I describing it right, of the difference of that 4 years of experience?
Yeah, I would say yes. And, learned early on, lots of things. But one, all these old cliches, there's no pictures on the scorecard. They're not taking video. Well, they are now. And, they are taking video. And so guys get a little bit concerned with how pretty their swing is, how quality was that shot, because it's like they're going to get judged. And so I would say, now you're moving on, number 2. So I'm worried about outcome. I'm worried about the results. I'm worried about what I'm going to shoot today. Before right when I get out of bed, if I'm not swinging very good, I'm like, oh my God, could this be one of those awful, humiliating, embarrassing days, and all my buddies, everybody's going to see it and think I'm a bad person because I'm going to go out and shoot 80. You have to get over. That's just
right.
Part of it.
No, it's so interesting though of that learning curve, right? And it's all relative, right? Like you played competitive matches, and I'll never play the PGA Tour, but you can still get nervous, right? And then all of a sudden you kind of get comfortable being nervous, and the expectations sort of change. You're like, okay, even if I start off with, I'm 1 over after 4 or something, like, okay, I'll get a birdie and get it back. And when you're less experienced, things start moving faster, and your brain starts going, oh my God, I'm going to shoot 78 and look like an asshole. And it's interesting as you get better mentally of how you can sort of slow it down, stay in the moment, see the golf shot, execute the golf shot, go to the next hole. And if you get mad like Tiger for 30 seconds. By the time you're up to that next shot, you're trying to get it up and down. We're going to make a par, right? Boy, it sounds simple, but it's damn hard to learn.
I know where I was headed a minute ago. It's learning. You hope you learn it early, but separating your score from your self-worth,
Mm-hmm.
that type of stuff. Amateurs and just play for fun, no, it's not as big a deal. I think that's more learning. The guys that play golf for fun, because we're talking elite golf. We're talking high-level golf here for the most part, but amateur golf, I still, they got to go back and learn some of the rudimentary ball flights, laws, and, just figure out pretty quick and see it that, the way I'm delivering this golf club, it's got very little chance of hitting the shot I want to play. And so that starts with, grip, setup, posture, pivot, load, all that. If you do it right, the first half right, you got a better chance of doing the second half right. A lot of it's just going to take care of itself. But the juniors is learning that the juniors, amateurs, kids, college players, separating their scores from their self-worth is just enormous. And, keeping things in perspective. And I think that's kind of what 92 did for me, is that not really that many people, I didn't get asked a whole bunch of times, hey, how was the blow up? You're an asshole. Some people relish in other people's, train wrecks. That's fine. You don't really want to be those aren't your friends anyway. So, I had to learn, you're talking specifically 92, was it a technical problem, a strategic problem, or, something else? And honestly, it was not a technical problem as much as it was, I didn't adjust to the condition changes at Pebble.
Yeah.
Where all of a sudden five was a good score on number 9, or 5 was a good score on number 10. I just kept pressing, trying to make up ground, and where it was literally impossible. And, but I got to watch Tom Kite play one of the greatest rounds I've ever witnessed in my life, and, handle the conditions beautifully. But you got to remember, he's a pretty conservative guy. He won, 20 times, and, could have won more. But, Hall of Famer. But he's a conservative guy by nature. His game was conservative. His game plan was conservative. He played only to his strengths, played away from his weaknesses, and that's exactly what he did that day. He kept his crap together, and he's got a U.S. Open trophy in his house because of it. And it's because the conditions changed so drastically from really what we'd seen the first, 3 days there, and even mid-round. It started on about the third or fourth hole, so pretty early on, but he made some critical, tactical changes and adjustments that matched his mindset. And I got, well over par, several over par early. And it was like, I'm trying to figure out how to get back to even par when, honestly, 76 or 7 would have been a really darn good score that day.
Yeah, I mean,
so I learned that was different. So I learned a lot. You know what I mean? It was a ton. So you go back and redo your swing because you had one bad round. Are you kidding me? Probably did work. Think it was some swing stuff. But truth be told, no, it was mental. I was a mental midget that day, and it took a while to get over, and I was a better player for it.
Well, and you got over the finish line, and you have yours as well, along with Mr. Kite. So, right? I mean, you got one. It's in the trophy case.
No, it's
Well,
Yeah.
it's a hell of an accomplishment. You know, what you accomplished on winning a major championship, most professional golfers don't get there. So, you know, it's so cool that you used that learning experience. And then when you were ready in 96, you jumped on that opportunity, you know, and you're a part of history. I mean, there's very few, you know, they don't give those things out all that often. I mean, they're hard to win. So to have one, it's a pretty cool accomplishment there, Pro. Pretty cool.
Well, you can say, you know, you're standing there on the 18th tee in the playoff, or the 18th tee on the 72nd hole. What were you thinking over that tee shot? And I can assure you 100%, I don't remember what it was. I don't remember this day. But I promise you, I had a swing thought. I had a key that I focused 1,000% on. I didn't, you know, it wasn't about, well, don't hit it over there, don't go over here. It was 100%, you know, whatever. Pressure that inside that left foot as hard as you can and go, you know, whatever. So I was 100% engrossed in executing the shot. And, you know, I had learned the hard way to, learn from, but accept the outcome of the shot.
Yes.
And we're better at different times, you know, better than other times. You know, it doesn't mean you don't have fire in your belly and get mad and, you know, get frustrated and all that. But generally speaking, you know, you stick with the game plan. And mine was, like I said, I learned from my guy early on. He wasn't swing. My probably best tip from Doug Higgins, my best, you know, takeaway from my time with him was that one thing. He says, all you have to do, you can be nervous, but you just have to, you know, be calm enough to concentrate solely on the execution of the shot you're trying to play.
Yes.
And so I call it, you know, and we've all heard the term get in the bubble. I got pretty good at getting in the bubble. I got pretty good at getting in my little bubble. And, you know, you let the caddy could penetrate the bubble with information, but that's it. Then he's back out. So, you know, learning how to get in your own little world and, you know, playing with people out there and the crowds and all that, that's all part of it. So but where I'll circle back around, where you learn to get in the bubble, that's by yourself. That's the solitary practice, focused solitary practice. That's where I got it.
I was going to ask you on golf course design. I know you've done some work, you know, and golf course design has changed, right, from the 90s to where we're at now. I personally like it more now with a little bit more minimalistic design, bringing a little more links into it. I love links golf. It's like my favorite style. But, you know, like you've done work on these things. You know, there's nothing. I mean, you know, where it kind of went sideways in the 90s with, you know, massive waterfalls and, you know, forced carries and, you know, not let the land just speak to the golf course of trying to manufacture everything. I love the more minimalistic link style, and then thank God they're kind of bringing it back a little bit with some of the younger designers and you know, some of the new courses or you know, sort of redoing some of the old ones, right, where they did Oakmont and stuff like that, taking trees out and giving players more options. But what in your opinion makes, you know, a really great golf course, good golf course, and you know, where can it go bad? In you know, what are some of your favorite styles to play?
I'm right with you. I'm a links fan, huge links golf fan. Obviously, can't get that experience, you know, very many places anywhere near us, you know, within a 3-hour flight. But true links golf, you know, it starts with the turf. As you know, links is the turf, not the golf holes. It's
right.
Actually the turf, the ground that it's played on. It's links ground, links land. And, you know, it's that sandy, I'm going to call it springy, got a little bit, you know, as hard as St. Andrews is because they get so much play. And when they've been in, you know, if they're semi-drought conditions, that place gets pretty darn firm. But typical links, because I've played, I don't know, 60 or 70 links courses over there in the British Isles, you know, it's just got this wonderful spring to the turf. And the thing that they were so good at, and, you know, it probably doesn't fit the modern bomber game near as much, but it's shot values is one. Number two, they weren't worried about something being quirky and it wasn't considered bad necessarily. You know what I mean? Like a push-up green at the end of a long hole. Well, it was just a hard hole.
Right.
And
blind tee shots.
They usually gave you a ground route to get there. It might have been, you know, tough, but they gave you some kind of ground route to get the ball on the surface. Not necessarily close to the hole. That we get spoiled to it in America. Every hole, in every hole pin position, you ought to be able to hit it 2 feet from the hole. Well, they don't even subscribe to that in pure links golf. Sometimes a great shot is 40, 50 feet away.
Mm-hmm.
And it's acknowledged by the knowledgeable galleries there. We get spoiled. If you're this long par 3 and the second you're sitting at the green, the second group through, some guy, stuffs a 235-yard 4-iron in there 2 feet. Well, you think that's now the standard. So every other shot hit in there, it's outside about 10 feet, it's just kind of average, which is total crap. But that's the mentality that a lot of our, let's just say, more ill-informed or less experienced fan, that's what they come to expect. Anyway, it's wild, but yeah, I'm a links golf fan. I think the other thing I can tell you is that we've had to, because of, real estate and other things, but have tied to golf. We've had to build a lot of golf courses on land that's not golfable, not really golfable. So got to move a lot of dirt. Fairways get too skinny. So a lot of manufactured golf. And although it can be gorgeous and, help sell, $1 million lots, it's not really, in my opinion, the greatest, not the golf experience you want. So we've forced a lot of golf courses onto ground in areas that, just really weren't very conducive to, premier golf courses.
Did you bring that links element into the design work that you did as much as you could? So even if you have a site that's not perfect, would you kind of think in that mentality of angles and a little bit more width off the tee and trying to give guys who might be, the ability to use the ground if you can? Was that sort of always in your thinking when you did golf course design or consulting work?
It was. Yeah, it was. I mean, I won't say it's often because it can get boring, but when you can put what's called, you can put a green on grade is the word, that's kind of a term, meaning not pushed up in the air. A lot of golf courses, I'll throw one out there, Wingfoot, and outside of New York City, the famous course. Those are all push-up greens there. And there's a reason for that. They push them up. A lot of times, courses, of course, in Texas or where we used to see them, push-up greens were done because they were built in floodplain. So you push them up to get them out of, potential flood. You didn't want your greens getting covered in water with, a heavy rain. But the other reason they pushed them up was to get surface drainage. And, they push them up that way they could get some fall and get the water off of them by surface and not having, the subsurface drainage that we now have. So I tried to get greens, I like to call it on grade, meaning, it would just flow in from the fairway onto the green, which is, you see that a lot in links golf, where it's just right on grade and flows right in. And that is conducive to ground golf. And America's played primarily, we play our golf in the air. I mean, there's no question. And, it's just been an evolution. The golf ball goes higher, goes farther, all that stuff. But, most people are, and everybody tries to tell you, put it on the ground. I go, fine, but you can't. I mean, a lot of these golf courses, you literally can't roll a ball onto, let's say, not half the green. Sometimes it might be 14 of the greens. You could not consistently bounce a ball into the green. So, yes, I love seeing it when you can, put the ball on the ground and actually, hey, it might be the right play sometimes to put it on the ground. So, yeah, that's just, but a lot of that's just, it's evolution. It's, building golf courses where, we really shouldn't be building golf courses. And there you go.
Is there a couple, 2 or 3 links golf courses of all of them that you've played that just stand out, that are just stands the test of time, so much fun, and just one of your favorites? If you could just wake up and go play there, like, that's a happy spot to be.
Yeah, Prestwick, North Berwick, Royal Dornoch, St. Andrews. I mean, I could just go on and on and on. I mean, the Royal Dornoch in the northern part of Scotland would be on my top, 4 or 5 list in the world. I mean, it's just a phenomenal place. You've heard of North Berwick.
Oh, yeah.
Just up the road from Muirfield. It has, all these phenomenal green complexes that have been copied, hundreds of times all over the world, and rightfully so. I'll copy them. They're templates that should be copied. And, the original Redan par 3s there's a Barrett's green. It just goes on and on. And my design philosophy was obviously several fold, but one was, you really can't design a quality golf course for, a real high handicapper. You just can't do it. It's insulting to everyone, including the 36 handicapper, because they probably don't want to be a 36. Okay.
Right.
Let's just face if they're serious. So that's number one. Number two is I use shot values. I mean, shot value. The longer the hole, the bigger the target. I mean, it's just pretty much got to be that way. And then you got all your other little things. What's a perfect golf course? It's 2 opposing loops of 9. That's it. You get every wind direction. That's Muirfield. That's one of the great attributes of Muirfield. With the exception of one hole, just to link it together, Muirfield in Scotland is 2 opposing loops of 9. You don't start your golf course towards the east. Why? The early starters don't want to be blinded the first 2 or 3 holes. You don't finish to the west. You have all your par 3s go different directions if humanly possible. Your par 5s go different directions. So all those little elements start coming in there, and that's what helps formulate a great routing. And you have a great routing. You put a good set of greens at the end of each routing, the routing of the course, and you'll probably end up with a pretty interesting golf course. There you sum it up.
I was fortunate to go over there this fall for the first time and play, and it lived up to the hype. I mean, I loved Muirfield. Thought the old course at St. Andrews, that was my favorite. But, I think that design is that old, and, no one knows exactly who all built them. But you're exactly right. I mean, we caught, St. Andrews, the old course, on a not terribly windy day. It's beautiful weather, but you can see how you still have to hit all the golf shots, and it's so much fun to play it on top of it, right? It's an enjoyable golf course. It's amazing. It's that old, and it still stands up the test of time, to be that great of a golf course. It's fantastic.
It's the ultimate, strategic, strategic, depending on where the hole locations are cut. But if you have a pretty tight set of pins cut, a good, let's just call it tournament caliber setup at St. Andrews, it's a chess game. I mean, it is a chess game. And, firm conditions, 15-mile-an-hour wind, let's call it the traditional, which would be left to right going out.
Yep.
It's the ultimate chess game of golf. And risk reward, you want a better angle, you got to play closer to some, pot bunkers. You got to play closer to the tight line. You can play left all day there. Everybody says, well, go left, left, left. You go left, fine, but you don't have good angles in.
Correct.
On a lot of shots. So, it's a chess game.
And it lives up to the hype, right? Some of the things in life you're always wondering, is it going to be that good? God, it's that good. Muirfield's that good. Carnoustie, that backside is that good. Those courses were, God, what a pleasure to play. I can't wait to get back there someday and do it again. It's that good. Yeah, it's that good.
That would be the one city I'd move to. I don't know if I could take 12 months a year there, but I'd live 6 months in St. Andrews in a heartbeat.
It's funny you say that. I loved it. My wife even loved. She's not a golfer, and she's just the vibe of the city, the university being there, the people. She's like, I could do this, 5-6 months a year. I'm like, oh, you're speaking my language of, 10 years, go retire over there, and the kids will be old enough at that point, and go do it. There's something magical about that city, isn't there? I can't put my finger on it, but there's beyond the golf. That place is special.
All right, I'll give you a hint. People that don't play golf wear golf clothes still there.
Yeah, it's got some. There's something about that city that's just special. I loved it. I mean, I loved it.
So the golf there has a spiritual element. Okay, there's no question about it. There is a spiritual element to the golf in Scotland, Ireland, and really England in a lot of places. So it lets it transcend, a lot of the modern garbage that we have to deal with on a daily basis. It's still, slap your 14 sticks, clubs in a bag and go play a stick and ball game, on a ground that's been, a sport similar has been played for hundreds of years. There's no question there's a spiritual element to the game there, and that lends itself to people, I'll use this term, they demand respect for the game, and they demand it. And, I know there's the R&A and all the guys that are trying to preserve a lot of the traditions are, I'm sure they're torn, about having to do certain things, but, to help modernize, the golf course. What do you mean modernize? I mean, it's a joke, but there's a spiritual element.
1,000%, right? So like on the first tee, I was fine. I was like, all right, we're playing golf, and then I'm on 17 and hit a really good drive, and I put it on in 2. After a really good little 3/4 low draw up the right hand side. God forbid somehow I hit 2 good shots in a row. I'm walking up to the green. All of a sudden I start crying, and I'm like, I've never had tears on a golf course ever in my life, ever. And I don't know, like something just hit me, like walking up 17. I'm not bawling or anything, but I got tears coming down my eyes. Like, what is it about this place, that is so spiritual, right? Then you see 18 and you go over the bridge, and it's like there's something there, right? I've never experienced anything else like that in golf. There is something there about being on that golf course and playing it. And I was like, oh, I'm fine. Like, just, playing some pretty solid golf. I'm good. Nope, saw 17, put it on 2, and then all of a sudden it hit me. I was like, okay. This is different. This is 100% different. It's a hell of an experience.
It is, and they've done a fantastic job of not letting it get too commercialized. Be the word, too fancy. I know they're going to have. It's interesting. They're doing the locker rooms now. The new, they're doing fancier locker rooms.
Yeah.
You know where they're going.
Yeah.
Pretty funny.
Yeah.
They're going underground, man.
Yeah.
We're going to give you all these modern locker rooms and, probably wonderful showers and all this stuff. But guess what? No one's going to see it.
Right.
You're going to go to the dungeon for that because we're not touching this hallowed ground up here.
No, nor should they. Right. And if it,
and I noticed they've already removed the approach to the Swelken Bridge. So
yes, I was, I was surprised, I was like, why would they even think about doing that? I mean, let it be dirt. Who cares? Right. Like I want it to be the same as it was forever, right? It doesn't need to be improved.
No, the patio. So the patio's been removed already.
Yes, saw that. People were outraged. They're like, "Oh God, don't change anything." Right? Social media. That's a victory for social media on that one, right?
One of the few.
Yes.
One of the few.
even like Nick Faldo was like, "I don't get this one. I want dirt on my toes from that sacred ground." Like, so even you got guys who won there are like, pull these damn things out. I think they got the message kind of quick on that one. So, it's a great spot. Well, thank you so much for your time on this. Like, I really enjoyed the conversation, and everything that you've seen in this great game. And, it's been a true pleasure to have you on. I've really enjoyed this.
Well, thanks for having me. And the journey continues. So
absolutely.
We're in it for the long haul. And, we can relax on certain things, clothing at the course and all that. But, man, we got to hold tight and true to some of the greatest traditions this game, has provided and should continue to provide.
I'm with you, bro. I'm with you.
You got it.